I always knew that safe wasn't supposed to be opened, not by anyone except Grandma, and maybe not ever. It sat in the corner of her bedroom closet for as long as I could remember, small, dark, and heavy, like it carried more than just metal inside. When she died, that safe became the center of everything that went wrong in my family, even though at first I didn't realize it would change my life completely. Before all of that, my life was simple in a quiet way. I was in my early 30s, married, working a steady office job, and visiting Grandma every Sunday like I always had. She raised me more than my own parents did, especially after my mom passed away when I was a teenager. Grandma was calm, careful, and private, the kind of woman who kept important things close and didn't explain herself unless she had to. My uncle, her only son, was very different, loud, charming when it suited him, and always talking about money problems that were somehow never his fault. I loved him because he was family, but I never fully trusted him, not even when Grandma was alive. The first sign that something was off came a week after the funeral. We were all in Grandma's house, sorting through her things, moving slowly because no one wanted to be the first to say what should be sold or thrown away. My uncle kept wandering in and out of rooms, checking drawers, opening cabinets, acting restless. At one point, I noticed the closet door in Grandma's room was open, and the corner where the safe usually sat was empty. When I asked him about it, he barely looked at me and said he was just keeping it somewhere safe. That should have been the moment I pushed harder, but grief makes you quiet and I let it go. A few days later, he told me something that didn't sit right. He said Grandma never left anything valuable, that the jewelry she used to wear was old junk, and that he'd already taken care of selling it to cover some of her debts. I remember standing in my kitchen, holding my phone, feeling my chest tighten as he spoke so casually about it. Grandma loved her jewelry, not because it was flashy, but because every piece had a story. I had seen her open that safe once, just once, and inside were velvet boxes lined up neatly, not junk, not random, but treasured things. Still, I told myself maybe I was being emotional, maybe he knew something I didn't. That uneasy feeling followed me for weeks. Every time I thought about Grandma, I thought about that safe and the way my uncle's voice sounded when he said it was handled. I started going through old memories, old conversations, and one night I remembered something small but important. About a year before she died, Grandma had asked me to drive her to a jewelry appraiser in the city. She told me it was just for insurance, that she wanted to be organized, but I remembered how serious she looked that day, how she asked me to wait outside while she went in alone. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now it felt like a piece of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was collecting. I tried asking my uncle again, gently this time, what exactly he sold and where. His answers were vague, changing slightly each time, and when I pushed a little more, he snapped at me, saying I was accusing him of something ugly. That's when I realized this wasn't just about grief or misunderstanding anymore. Something had been taken, something important, and I was the only one who seemed to care enough to ask questions. The more he brushed me off, the more certain I became that the safe really was meant to stay sealed, and that opening it had set off something he couldn't control. That was the moment I decided I needed to find the truth, even if it meant going places I wasn't ready for yet. The deeper I looked, the worse everything felt. I started by going back through Grandma's papers, the ones she'd kept in labeled folders, neat and careful, like everything else she did. There were insurance documents, handwritten notes, and tucked into the back of one folder, a business card from a jewelry appraisal office with a date written on it in her handwriting. My hands shook when I saw it because it matched the day I drove her there. That card felt like proof that my memories weren't exaggerations, that Grandma knew exactly what she had, and that it mattered. When I confronted my uncle with this, he laughed in a way that felt rehearsed. He told me I was imagining things, that appraisals didn't mean value, and that I should stop digging before I embarrassed myself. His words hurt, but what hurt more was how confident he sounded, like he believed there was no way I could challenge him. That confidence lit something in me, not anger at first, but determination. I didn't want to fight him, I just wanted answers, but it was clear he wasn't going to give them freely. I went back to the appraiser on my own, not expecting much, just hoping they might remember Grandma. When I walked into the office, it felt strangely familiar, like stepping into a memory I'd forgotten I had. I explained who I was, showed them the card, and waited while they looked through their records. When the woman behind the desk looked up at me, her expression changed, and that was when my stomach dropped. She told me they remembered my grandmother very clearly, not just because of who she was, but because of what she brought in. According to their records, Grandma's jewelry collection was extensive and valuable, carefully documented, photographed, and appraised in detail. I left that office feeling dizzy, my mind racing. If the appraiser's records were real, then my uncle's story didn't just fall apart, it collapsed completely. That meant the jewelry he claimed was worthless was anything but, and whatever he sold wasn't his to sell. That night, I cried harder than I had since the funeral, not just for Grandma, but for the realization that someone I trusted had taken advantage of her legacy and assumed no one would notice. I felt small and naive for not acting sooner, but underneath that sadness, something stronger was forming. I didn't rush into anything after that. I knew if I acted on pure emotion, I'd lose. Instead, I started documenting everything. Dates, conversations, copies of records, and I quietly consulted a lawyer, framing it as a question, not an accusation. The lawyer's reaction was calm but firm. What my uncle did, if proven, wasn't just wrong, it was illegal. Hearing that out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. This wasn't a family argument anymore, it was a matter of truth and accountability. The breaking point came when my uncle announced at a family dinner that Grandma's estate was closed, that everything had been settled, and that we should all move on. He looked directly at me when he said it, daring me to challenge him. I smiled, nodded, and said nothing, but inside I felt strangely calm. I'd stopped reacting and started planning, and he had no idea. As I drove home that night, I realized the betrayal wasn't just about jewelry or money. It was about respect, about assuming I was too quiet, too emotional, too weak to do anything about it. That assumption was the mistake he'd regret. The appraiser's report was the turning point, but the execution was quiet, almost invisible. My lawyer contacted the appraiser directly, requested certified copies of the records, and then traced where similar pieces had been sold in the months after Grandma's death. It didn't take long to connect the dots. My uncle had sold the jewelry through a secondary dealer, thinking the trail would end there. He underestimated how detailed professional records are and how willing people are to cooperate when the truth is clear. The confrontation didn't happen at a family gathering or over an emotional phone call. It happened in an office with papers laid out neatly on a table. When my uncle realized what was happening, his confidence drained from his face. He tried to explain, to minimize, to say he was just handling things, but the words sounded hollow even to him. For the first time, he looked scared, not of me, but of consequences he couldn't talk his way out of. The resolution was messy but fair. The remaining proceeds from the sale were recovered, and the rest was settled through legal channels. Some relationships didn't survive, and I won't pretend that didn't hurt. Family gatherings became quieter, more careful, but I learned something important through all of it. Standing up for what's right doesn't always look dramatic or loud. Sometimes it looks like patience, records, and letting the truth speak for itself. Now, when I think about that safe, I understand why Grandma kept it sealed. It wasn't just about protecting jewelry. It was about protecting intentions, stories, and trust. Opening it the wrong way revealed more than anyone expected, and in the end, it showed me who I really was. Not the quiet granddaughter everyone underestimated, but someone capable of protecting what mattered, even when it was uncomfortable. And that lesson, more than anything inside that safe, is what I carry with me now. Time didn't fix everything, but it softened the sharpest edges. Months passed after the legal dust settled, and life slowly returned to something that looked normal on the outside. I went back to my routines, my job, my quiet evenings, but inside I felt different, steadier in a way I hadn't been before. The family stopped talking about what happened, not because it didn't matter, but because it was easier to pretend it was over.
My uncle disappeared from my daily thoughts, reduced to a lesson instead of a presence. And that distance gave me space to breathe again. One afternoon, while cleaning out a box of Grandma's old letters, I found something unexpected. It was a short note written in her careful handwriting, folded neatly and tucked inside a birthday card she'd given me years ago. I must have missed it before, but reading it then felt intentional, like it waited for the right moment. She wrote about trust, about knowing when to stay quiet and when to speak, and about how love doesn't mean letting people do whatever they want. I sat on the floor holding that note, realizing she had known me better than I ever realized, even when I doubted myself. That letter changed how I saw the entire story. What happened wasn't just something that happened to me, it was something I was meant to walk through. I stopped feeling embarrassed about taking legal action and stopped questioning whether I had gone too far. I hadn't taken revenge out of spite or anger. I had protected something that mattered, something that deserved respect. That clarity brought peace in a way no apology ever could. The final closure came quietly. I visited Grandma's house one last time before it was sold, standing alone in her old bedroom. The safe was gone, the closet empty, but the space felt lighter, like the room had exhaled. I thanked her out loud, not for the jewelry or the inheritance, but for the strength she'd passed down to me without ever saying a word. I left the house knowing that chapter was truly closed. Now, when I look back, I don't focus on the betrayal first, I focus on the moment I chose myself, chose truth over silence, and chose courage over comfort. That safe was meant to stay sealed because what was inside wasn't just valuables, it was a mirror, and opening it showed everyone exactly who they were. And for me, that reflection changed everything.